I think you guys already know who I am. But what I'd like to do is maybe give you a little background how I came to where I am today as a full-time animal rights activist. So I worked in sales for maybe 20 years. I started sales around when I was 18 years old. I'm 37, so it's 19 years, I guess. For the last 10 years of my professional career, I was a sales manager and a sales director, so I hired a lot of salespeople, and I trained them a lot. I've trained probably hundreds of salespeople over my career. This workshop is normally a 2-day workshop, delivered over a weekend, a Saturday and a Sunday usually. What we're going to have today is a very compressed version of it, so very kind of high level. We're not going to go in depth into any of the topics, but it will still give you a really good idea of the framework that I use when I do outreach. Has anyone seen any of my outreach videos? Not that there are a lot, there's not too many, but I know AV posted a few of them. Okay, so there's definitely some of the things that I use in that I'm thinking about that I'll share with you. But then I think what you'll also see is after you see this presentation, you'll really realize that no conversation is perfect. Every conversation can go a million different ways. So this just serves as like my framework, what I'm trying to maybe keep the conversation on track with, but it often goes in, so sometimes you're really trying to bring it back. But I'll tell you why I'm trying to bring it back and why I try to follow this, the framework we'll talk about today. I also want to talk about sales just for a minute, because I know that most people that I speak with, before when I was just working in sales or now when I do this workshop and people hear that it's based on like a sales strategy or methodology, think that it's manipulative or that it's not genuine or that we're trying to trick people into buying something or doing something. And although there are tactics that I've learned over my career in sales on like how to do those things, this workshop is not based on that, and I never depended on those tactics. So the time that I depended on some of those tactics was like right when I was really young and I was doing like door-to-door sales or telemarketing. Those are much more difficult forms of sales because people hate you. Like, I can't tell you how many times I would get the door just slammed in my face, and so, but really, what I think my approach to sales, how it's evolved, and what I'm going to show you guys today, is a method to help other people, to coach other people, to facilitate their thought processes and their decision-making abilities, not for us necessarily to impose our views on other people. And that's a really important thing. When I worked in corporate sales, I wasn't trying to sell someone, an alarm system at their doorstep and then leave and never see them again. I was trying to develop relationships with CEOs and CFOs and long-lasting relationships between two organizations. So, if I trick somebody into buying something, they're not stupid. First of all, they probably won't fall for it. But even if later on they realize, oh crap, this guy made me buy something that's useless, I'm not going to have a good relationship with that person. My reputation in that industry is going to be tarnished. And I think that goes the same thing for us as animal rights activists. I think it's important that we, as a group, as an international collective of activists, that we make sure that our integrity is solid, that people can't point to us and say they're lying, they're trying to make stuff up. So that's just a little side note as to, when we share facts, when we share anything, there's really no need to ever exaggerate what it is that we see, what it is that we do. People still claim that we're exaggerating things. Like when I share videos sometimes, people will still find ways to think that it's fake, but it's not, obviously. But we don't need to exaggerate facts or our positions. I think our position is strong enough as it is. So one of the main things that I want to accomplish today, some of the goals, is one, like I mentioned, to share with you this framework and this some of the concepts that I've learned over the last 19 years, which have helped me be successful in my professional career, and that I find very useful when I do outreach in Cubes of Truth, virtual reality outreach. Has anyone done virtual reality outreach before? Yeah? To me, it's the most powerful form of outreach. It takes more time, obviously, because people need to watch these headsets. but man, people always take them off and they're almost always like really affected or crying, and they're much more open. So share some of those strategies that I use. Of course, one of the other things too is I hope that for those of us who don't have a strong kind of plan when we're going into an outreach conversation, that if this plan resonates with you, like if you like what you hear today, use it. If you like parts of it, use parts of it. If you don't like this, then don't use it. But I still suggest that you find some plan so that when you go into a conversation, you have an idea of these kind of things, what you want to accomplish, and how to accomplish them. How to accomplish them. The reason I really suggest that is I'm also a big believer in assessing and improving, constant improvement. The industries that we're working against are constantly improving. You know, they have professionals, highly paid professionals, that they know what they're doing. They know how to market. They know how to advertise. So, you know, when we all decided, when they started working in their industries, they went to school, they went through university, they got training when they started at their jobs. When we became animal rights activists, I never received a training on how to be an animal rights activist, right? So this is one of probably many different types of workshops you could attend, and definitely try to attend as many workshops and trainings and seminars and whatever you can attend, because it adds to your playbook, like whatever it is that resonates with you, you know? And there's some workshops I've seen which I really liked, some which I took one or two things from. So yeah, just that idea of constant improvement, I hope that I can help contribute to that for you guys today. Yeah, let's get started. Every once in a while you'll see a rescue animal. I think I've put only pigs in this one, because I love pigs, so yeah. Every once in a while they'll just pop up throughout the presentation. This is the agenda for today. I'll share the framework that I use. We'll talk about the vegan animal rights world that we live in compared to the non-vegan world, which a lot of us probably forgot about already and want to forget about. 3 V's is just a reference to communication, so we'll talk about some communication skills. Not just how we communicate, but also how our communication is perceived by others. Questions. We'll talk about how to ask really good questions in outreach conversations. So I mentioned when I was explaining sales, and I believe this to be true for outreach conversations, my goal is to help other people, to coach them. We all know that most people share the same values, right? Most people don't like seeing animals suffer. Most people somewhat care about the environment. Most people don't want to get cancer tomorrow. So at some level, we share the same values. We want to coach them and help them discover and kind of connect with their own values, and then help them realize that veganism has some of the things that will help them achieve those the things that are important to them in life, right? So to do that, we have to understand people. And to understand people, we have to be able to ask good questions. So we'll talk about that. Attributes versus values. We'll just talk about the difference between what is an attribute and what is a value, and how we should think about that. That'll become a lot clearer when we get to that section. And probably the most, I think people's favorite section is objection handling. So when we get objections to veganism, how to deal with them. We all get them. If anyone here does outreach, we all get objections. If you don't get an objection in a conversation, that's probably a bad sign. That's probably because the person's not really caring or not really paying attention or thinking about it. So objections are good, but we'll talk about how to deal with those. So in the corporate world, the training that I used to deliver was called customer-focused selling. Everything that we wanted to do was focused on the other person, not on our company, not on our product, not on our services. We really wanted to get to understand our customers. In this case, we don't really have customers, so I've rebranded the name of the training to this, which I think makes more sense. Has anyone here not heard the term carnist before? Is that a new term for anybody? No? Everyone's heard it? Okay, cool. So Melanie Joy has done a good job. Yeah, and as you know, carnist is not an insult, right? It's just a really interesting way to describe how and why eating meat is so prevalent in society, how it's believed to be normal, natural, and necessary. So really, we are experts, right? As vegans, as animal rights activists, we're experts in animal rights. We're experts in the environmental impact of animal agriculture. We also know a lot about the health benefits. I was talking to someone who's a nutritionist, and if we're not nutritionists, we've probably done a lot of research and read a lot of stuff about it. So we do know a lot about this, but I want to encourage us to forget about it when we're talking to people, at least for the beginning of that conversation. I'm going to show you the framework. This is what is like burned in the back of my mind, in my memory. Like, this is what I'm always thinking of when I'm trying to go through conversations. I'm trying to keep to this path as best as possible. It doesn't always work perfectly, but this is what I'm trying to do. I'm not going to explain each one right now, but the presentation is going to go through it. So let's start with the first step, which is opening. For the purposes of this workshop, I'm also going to use Anonymous for the Voiceless as the main example. So all the examples I'll be doing are based on cubes of truth, but you might be able to extrapolate or think of other scenarios where these examples might work. And the reason I choose Anonymous, I think, is very obvious. It's the largest grassroots organization, animal rights organization, and their whole focus is about doing outreach, which I think is fantastic. Just by a show of hands, how many people here have attended a Cube of Truth, whether you're in the cube or outside of the cube? Okay. And is there anyone here who hasn't had the opportunity yet but wants to attend a Cube of Truth? Awesome. Okay, cool.
Today is the day.
Today? Oh, sweet. That's so cool. Is everyone coming today?
Yeah.
That's sweet. Just like a show of hands, how many people in this room are going to the Cube today?
Woo.
This is going to be an awesome Cube.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the largest Cube so far? Oh, we're going to smash it today. Awesome. Okay, so I get super excited. Okay, so I'm genuinely competitive with myself. It's just my personality. I like sports. I like competing. But I was always competitive within sales. Again, with myself. I always wanted to do better. I know some people aren't competitive, and that's totally cool. But this gets me excited when it's like we're gonna have the biggest cube, and it's gonna have such a strong impact. And was anyone here part of the cube in Essen? A few people. Yeah. Did anyone see the picture from that? Yeah. That was just like incredible. We're going to do something, I mean, with this many people, it's going to feel very close to that, I hope, today, so I'm excited. Okay. Berlin, yeah, there's a 24-hour cube. I won't be able to be there because I'll be in California doing some workshops, but I will be back in Europe later on this year, from July all the way till December. So I will probably, hopefully, see you guys again. But if you're going to the cube in Berlin, that's going to be pretty epic. Okay, let's go to opening trust, building trust and credibility. So if you think about a cube of truth, right? You have this awesome 52-person cube in Essen, or today maybe like what do you think? Maybe like 12, 16? Yeah, 16. Okay, 16-person cube, and then you have strangers out in the street walking up. Oh, what is this? And they walk over and they start watching. And here you are, right? You're the outreacher, and you're looking for your next victim. You're like, I see someone, right? So the funny thing is, this is so much like retail sales. I used to work in retail early on in my career as well. And like, man, you're just like waiting for customers. You see someone, you're like, yes. Right? Think about this, that this person has no idea who you are, right? And on top of that, so you're a stranger, they're a stranger, you have very, very good will in your heart. We know that. They don't know that, right? They have no idea what's even going on right now. A lot of people come over because they see the anonymous masks and they think it's something like political or something. They have no idea. So we're approaching a stranger, and we're trying to accomplish, at least I hope we're trying to accomplish, something right from the beginning, which is this: building rapport. I'm going to explain what the word rapport is because I've heard that it's not a commonly used word. So rapport is something that it refers to like the relationship that I would have with someone. So if Christoph. So Christoph and I have a good rapport. It means we trust each other. He wouldn't take what I say the wrong way. He would give me the benefit of the doubt if I said something that maybe wasn't, that he wasn't sure of. We generally like each other. If we have bad rapport, or if our rapport starts to fail, we might argue more. He might not trust me as much anymore. And what we're trying to do in these interactions right from the start is get people to at least trust us enough to engage in a serious conversation, right? And we're going to be really challenging people. Like, what we ask people to do is not a small ask, right? From their perspective, like, we're asking them to basically go vegan. I mean, ideally, the best case scenario is they decide to go vegan on the spot. Now, going vegan, for us, I mean, today it's so easy for me, but if I had been one of those people, somebody telling me, hey, go vegan, I would be like, you're crazy. Like, I don't even know how I would do that, let alone, I don't know why I would do that, right? So we have to be aware that we're actually asking people quite a bit, you know? And even if it's not going vegan, even if it's just taking a card and watching some documentaries, like, we're asking people to do one of the hardest things for some people, which is open their minds. Accept new information, right? It's uncomfortable when we accept new information because we become so just used to living life almost on autopilot. And we're asking them to take that autopilot off and learn something new. So to do that, here's the first thing that I like to think about, and this is the concept of the two worlds. So one of these circles represents our vegan, animal rights, cube of truth, anonymous world, that world. The other circle represents the non-vegans world, let's say, the carnivore world. Now, in this example, I just want somebody to kind of volunteer just to say kind of what you perceive, which circle represents which and why, and specifically when two people meet. So if I'm an individual, an animal rights activist, and I'm going to talk to a non-vegan, which one of these circles would represent my world and which one would represent their world?
I would say the big one is our world because our view is much wider. Khan's world is a smaller.
We have so much more information, we know a lot more than they do, definitely on the topic of veganism and animal rights. Yeah, I would agree with that idea. I know it's a really simple model, like you can perceive it many different ways. Any other interpretations of these two circles?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we could be the red circle because we're in the minority, and this is a more accepted view.
Yeah, we could be we definitely are the minority. So that's an interesting way to think about it as well.
And also in this moment, we only have one thing in mind. We just want to talk to them, so we have just the small will, and then on the other hand, the blue circle is like where they're coming from, what they have to do later in the afternoon or in the evening.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's rare that someone gets that because it's such a simple example, right? Like you can literally perceive it so many different ways. But I love that. And the reason why I think that we need to really remember that in the whole concept of carnist-focused veganizing is we're focusing on their world, right? To them, they didn't leave their house that day. They didn't leave their office to go to a cube of truth. They have all these other things going on in their lives, right? They have work, they have kids maybe, they have a partner, they have family, they're maybe going shopping that day, who knows what they're doing, and all of a sudden, here they come across our world, which to us seems like this, right? It's all I do, it's all I think about, but when you're focusing on their point of view, the attitude with which you go into that conversation, I think matters a lot. So I agree with you. Their world and our world. All we're trying to do really is, and I think somebody else mentioned it, is like our world is quite small. You know, veganism is quite small in relation to all the other things in the world and all the other things in their world. And we're just trying to figure out a way to fit our little vegan animal rights message into this big complex mess that's their brain. So, yeah. I'm going to move on to something related to the way that we communicate and how it also relates to building rapport. So to do that, I want to give you guys a little riddle. Can someone explain or translate what riddle is in German? Okay, so I should learn that. So here's the riddle, and I'm sorry, the riddle only works in English, so if you don't speak English, it might be challenging for you to actually work this riddle out. But you can observe how people, and observing it is also a lot of fun. So, this is the riddle. It's about cows and chickens. Now, what I'd like you to do is I'm going to give you the riddle, and if you know the answer, first of all, if you know the answer, you'll know that you know the answer. And when you're sure you know it, just put your hand up in the air. Don't say anything. Please don't talk to your neighbors, so don't help the person beside you. Don't explain it to them. I promise by the end of this riddle, everybody will get it. So here's the riddle. There are 30 cows in a field and 28 chickens. How many did not? Did you already figure it out? Sweet.
Can you say it again?
You figured it out? You had never heard it before? Wow. You figured it out as well? You would know. So I'll say it again. There are 30 cows in a field and 28 chickens. How many did not?
Oh, yeah.
Just put your hand up if you start getting it. Really high. Let's see them. So a few more people. I see a few more. Okay, okay. I'm going to say it again. Oh, someone else got it. Okay. I'll say it again. I'll say it slower for you guys. There are 30 cows in a field and 28 chickens. How many did not? Just put your hands up. Keep them up. Keep them up. I just want to see the room keep filling. Okay, now don't feel bad if you haven't gotten it, because I'm purposely doing something that's not allowing you to get it for most people. But I'm going to help you out right now. Ready? There are 30 cows in a field and 28 chickens. How many did not? Put your hands up in the air if you get it. Just put your hands straight up in the air if you got it. Okay, you can put your hands down. So what's the answer? Loud. 10, yeah. Does anyone need help? It's okay if you need help to get it. Did someone still not get it? And I could blame it on the language thing. No? Everyone got it? Okay. So the reason I give you that riddle is to demonstrate something important, which is this. The 3 V's. These are 3 things that we depend on when we communicate, and more importantly, when you perceive communication. I was communicating to you right there. I was communicating a riddle. You were using 3 things to understand what I was saying. At the beginning, you were only using this. You really were just kind of heard, you kind of like were listening to the words, but you were trying to figure out what the riddle was by thinking it through. When I started changing the way that I said what I was saying, more of you really started understanding what I meant, right? And what did I do? Someone that got it early on, what did I start doing when I started repeating the riddle?
You started enunciating the right part that would give meaning, the correct meaning.
The first time I said 30 cows in a field and 28 chickens. The second time I did it, and every time after, I said 30 cows and 28 chickens. And then I started slowing it down. And as my vocal started matching what I was trying to say, more of you understood exactly what I meant. But it still took, I think, the majority of people for me to do this. And this makes perfect sense, and I'm glad that the example worked, because what a lot of us might not know is that we actually depend a lot more on the nonverbal communication than we think. So when we think that we have to say the right words or say the right things, I mean, the words we're saying are important, but the point to which they're perceived exactly as we want really depends a lot on this. I'll give you another example of that. What if I say this? Nice shirt. Or what if I say this? Nice shirt. Same verbal, completely opposite meaning, and I'm changing my vocal and my visual, right? You're seeing something different, you're hearing something different. So, this is not to say that when we're talking in a cube of truth or in an outreach conversation, that we're necessarily going to communicate the opposite of what we mean, but it's very possible, and I do hear this a lot when I overhear outreach conversations or when I see outreach conversations online that I enjoy watching and learning from. But I sometimes see that the vocal and the visual don't exactly match the verbal, especially when we're talking about feelings and emotions. So these numbers, just so you guys know, these numbers are true for specifically when we're trying to communicate emotions and feelings about something. So it doesn't always match these percentages, and this is just, I mean, somebody had to come up with some numbers, so they did some studies, and that's what they came up with. It might not be perfect. But what I want to talk about for maybe about 5 minutes right now, or maybe a little bit longer, are things that we can do at a Cube of Truth, let's say, to make sure that the intention that we have, the rapport that we're trying to build with somebody, you know, the positivity that's genuinely in our hearts is coming through. So let's talk about the most important one, which is visual. What are some things, I want you guys to let me know, what are some things that we can do to make sure that we're coming across the way that we want to come across in a Cube of Truth?
Smile.
I heard smile, awesome.
Also give the other person the feeling that you're hearing and listening to them.
So for those of you who can't hear, give the other person the feeling that you're listening and hearing them, listening to them, sorry. How do we do that using visual communication?
Looking at them.
So smiling is one.
Into their eyes.
Yeah, eye contact.
Nodding.
Tell me more about that. But tell me,
Ask
what is it
them.
about nodding that helps?
Yeah, I mean, if somebody is talking to me and I'm listening, I'm sometimes as if I would understand what a person is saying. So,
Yeah, for those of you who've seen my outreach videos, I nod a lot. I nod not to show the person that I agree with what they're saying. I can definitely understand where they're coming from, and I want to encourage them to keep talking, and I want to encourage them to keep thinking for themselves. So nodding is a really, really important one that visually communicates something without you having to say anything. It's a really strong communicator. What else can we do?
Along with that, hearing them out.
Sorry?
Along with that, hearing them out.
Yeah, so like by that I would interpret you mean kind of like not interrupting and like
Yeah,
giving
exactly.
them space. Yeah, for sure.
It's,
Might not be so much of a visual thing, but I agree with that 100%. Like just shut up sometimes and let them talk.
Yeah.
I saw a hand over here.
Yeah, also trying to be conscious of your body language, like from which angle you approach the person, like you wouldn't approach the person from behind, but rather from the side. Or
Yeah, yeah. Like jump over their back, be like, hey, how's it going? So you mentioned kind of two things there. Let's talk about the first one, body language. What are some things that you would include in body language? Anybody? Yeah.
Just open body language in general, not just sit there and like just open and welcome the person.
And what might open body language versus closed off body language communicate?
What it means?
Yeah, what would it communicate to the other person, do you think?
Again.
I won't cause you any harm, because when I be like this, it's like we don't know if he got something in the hand, or we can't see what he's about to do, but if he's open, there's nothing to hide.
Yeah, maybe like on a subconscious level, there's something to do with that. I don't think people will consciously think this person's going to stab me. But there have been studies done. I can't refer to them, but there have been studies done where open body position, open body language, open hands are much more agreeable to people, and they tend to help you build that rapport with that person you're trying to build. I saw over here.
I was going to say, like, further to the open hands thing, like, there have been studies done that prove that the most effective posture by far with your hands is to have them open, face up, not face down, never point your finger as well, but like, that's the most effective because it feels receptive to the other person.
I've heard that as well.
Yeah.
Especially when you're public speaking. I know public speakers are taught to do this a lot. The one thing with everything we're talking about right now, and that we'll continue talking about, is going back to what sales is. It's all about authenticity and honesty. So never fake anything and never force anything, you know? If you start faking any of the things we're talking about, it's going to be really apparent and it's going to just look really weird. So it's little things, for example, when I, like, even here, like, for example, instead of pointing at you, I can do an open hand. When I refer to the video, I used to point a lot, you know, like, hey, what do you think about this? I just do an open hand now, because I learned that somewhere. So, we'll keep talking about this, but all the little things that we're talking about are just things that if we do all these little things, it can only help us. It can't hurt us. And sometimes if we don't do these things well, it could potentially inhibit our ability to build that rapport with that person. So, they're just little tips and tricks. If you forget one, if you point once, it's not going to ruin the conversation. But these are just little things you can all add together that helps. What else can we do? So we talked about body language. Let's talk a little bit more about body language. So not closed. You guys mentioned a bunch of other things like smiling and eye contact.
Maybe try to find the right moment where to, when to go to the person, you know, not too soon, but not that he's leaving.
Yeah,
So
so
to let him a little bit of time
Yeah,
to watch
time.
the video, get eye contact,
Yep.
first eye contact, coming along slowly
Yeah.
with a smile, something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, definitely smiling right from the initial, like when they look at you for the first time, a smiley face definitely helps. And I know that we're watching, so I know we're watching very graphic and very sad footage. That's not to mean that our whole conversation has to be wrapped in sadness. There's a flow to the conversation that might definitely go into valleys of sadness, which is totally cool. There's times where like there's a moment for a joke or a laugh, and that really, really helps to continue that rapport building with that person. Yes?
The way you're facing them, like facing them and not like away
Yeah.
from them.
So tell me about, why don't you come up and give me an example of how you would like, so let's say there's we'll say right here, so we're not in front of the light. Let's say the laptop is right here and I'm the spectator and I'm standing here like this. How would you like to stand? How would you like to
Well,
stand
I
next to
would
me?
come up to you like this,
Yeah.
and probably, like I'm facing this way, so I'm
Mhm.
also looking, but I'm also facing you, so I can communicate with you.
Mm-hmm. Can high five on that?
Yeah.
I love it. So that's actually, once you step here, if you don't mind, I'll use you as an example now, just to talk a little bit more about this. So body language, but I think you had also mentioned body position, where you stand. And I'm a big believer, all the way back into the point where I was doing sales for a living. I resisted, I would not want to ever stand across from somebody or sit across a desk or a boardroom table, for example. Psychologically, it's kind of like you're just you're on opposite sides, right? And this whole idea is that we want to be coaching and helping this person, not debating them, not arguing against them, not even like, I don't even like the word discussion. I don't want to have a discussion. I want to genuinely have a coaching conversation with this person. And when you align yourself, now I try to go as much flush with a person. I try not to do this as much, personally, for a few reasons. I can still look at the person. We're totally aligned. We're on the same side. And we're both watching this footage together, you know? I've seen this footage 100 times. This may be the first time they're seeing it, and it's probably the first time they're seeing a Cube of Truth. I want them to feel that we're working together to discover this, to uncover, you know, their feelings, their emotions about it. And I find very often people are very comfortable in this position. They don't, and I would know if they're not comfortable because they would want to move out of that position. So what happens if someone's not comfortable in however you're standing is they will start moving very slowly. And it has happened sometimes where I didn't quite realize I was maybe standing too close to somebody. And what I realized was like 5 minutes later is we had moved. Well, I got like over to here type of thing, you know? Because they're just slowly doing this, like not even consciously maybe, but so something to be aware of. If you start moving, you're too close to the person. I also want to talk about something that somebody taught me in this workshop. I had never really thought about it, but this was a really cool thing. Let's suppose we're watching the laptop, right? So imagine you're a stranger and I'm a stranger and you're watching this. Are you comfortable right now with the distance that we're at if we're talking and we're looking at a laptop? Are you relatively comfortable?
Yeah.
You're not uncomfortable, right?
No.
Check this out. That's about the distance that we have between us. If I were standing in front of her with this distance, right? Super uncomfortable. So when somebody brought up to me, which I had never thought about, what's your name? What somebody had pointed out to me that I didn't realize is you can stand closer to this person and you're about to engage in a really intimate conversation, right? You're going to talk about a really important topic and you're going to start asking them like questions, which could be very personal questions if you're asking them about feelings and values and emotions. So just the fact that you can be in this little bubble, I find helps so much versus having to stand, you know, maybe about this far apart. We're really separated, I feel, in that scenario. So just something to think about. Oh, and the other thing too is I can direct their gaze back to the video whenever I feel it's appropriate. Sometimes you're on a topic and the video comes up that matches what you're saying. You're like, look, this is exactly what I'm talking about, you know? And you can stand there and when I'm doing this, I'm hoping if I do it long enough, you'll stop looking at me like you just did, and you'll look at the video. So whenever you look at the video and stop looking at them, it's a cue for them to also look at the video. And they usually won't stare at you for too long, because it's also weird just to stare at somebody. I was waiting until you do it. I'm like, okay. But people will usually look in the direction that you're looking at. So thank you for the example.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure about it, but I think what also helps is to have a firm stand. Like, I think because it confirms what you're saying, confirms your statement.
Yeah. Confidence, not arrogance or not cockiness, but confidence is definitely really appreciated when you're talking about this stuff. And I really can't overestimate, there's a really fine line between confidence and arrogance. Or I should say the perception of it. We might feel like we're coming across confident, and I've definitely been like, I've gotten this feedback sometimes in scenarios where like I might come across as arrogant, and I really don't want to do that. And the way that I try to avoid coming across as arrogant in any scenario is humility, right? So coupling, you know, they're not exclusionary. You can be confident and still really humble, right? You can be confident in what you know, but also humble enough to know that I just know what I know. You know, I know what I've learned, and maybe I could be wrong about certain things, right? So there are lots of times where it's appropriate to ask the other person, you know, and you generally, you want to get into a conversation with them. So ask them, you know, what's your opinion? Or if they start giving you an objection, you know, you might be like, I never thought about that. Can you teach me more about that? Or help me understand that better? You know, and genuine curiosity, I want to like stress this, childlike curiosity about this person that you're meeting is so in their world, it's so out of our world. Take the time, it doesn't have to be a long time, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, to just start really understanding who this person you're talking to is. They're not just another person. They're not just another non-vegan. If we think of them like that, it'll be really difficult for us to form this like bond and this rapport with them that we need to coach them.
Yeah, hey man, I just want to like add further to that. Something that I've kind of developed when I'm doing conversations is to just genuinely compliment the person. Like when you feel, unless like this may not be the case with a lot of people as well, but with the vast majority of people that you speak to, they're going to be compassionate, loving people. So tell them so. Tell them that. Because I always do that. Like when I have a conversation and we've gotten to a certain point where they've made that very obvious, say, you guys seem like really nice people. You seem like really compassionate people. And like, I know that you feel that, you know. Do you know what I mean? Like obviously in amongst the Socratic dialogue and asking questions, but it just will make people feel that they're doing the right thing by listening to you. Yeah.
And just to be devil's advocate here, there's a fine balance between complimenting and patronizing.
Yeah, for sure.
And so it's like, it's this kind of fine line you have to walk. But I agree with you 100% is never miss a genuine opportunity to recognize when someone is doing something good. If someone says to me, hey, you know what, I've reduced my meat consumption, that is a damn good thing that they're doing. It's not the end point, but they're doing something. I want to recognize, actually, first I want to find out what made them do that, right? So I would ask them, oh, it's really cool. What made you decide to do that? Oh, I can't stand animal suffering. That's amazing that you're starting to align your actions with what you believe. Like, good for you. You know, how long has it been? Blah, blah, blah. I want to reinforce the positive actions that they're taking if they're going in the right direction, right? So we're a little off topic of the visual thing, but I think we've covered quite a few. Just a quick vocal thing or another visual thing?
Yeah, maybe one more thing.
Yeah.
What I also find helpful is mirroring.
Mm-hmm.
Seems to contradict the firm stand, but it's also the concept of following and then leading.
Yes. Yeah. So not to get too in depth into that, we actually talk about mirroring in like the full 2-day workshop, which takes a little bit longer. Just the idea that if you're matching body language, you can either mirror them, you know, if they do this, you can kind of do it as well. I tend to do this very subconsciously. I catch myself mirroring someone, so it's not usually like you should be looking to, how can I copy this person? It's not that, but the way I think about mirroring is if you find yourself mirroring them, or you find them mirroring you, you know that you're developing a good rapport, okay? So if you catch that, things are going well. I'll just touch on vocal really quickly. Yes.
Just for mirroring, in my experience, it's helpful to get in one level. So if you talk with like young guys,
Yeah.
just talk with their language. Don't act like a professor.
Right.
Just talk like basic language, and yeah, in one level, not like from
Yes.
upstairs.
Yes,
On the
yes.
same level, if there's like a well-educated student,
Yep.
then talk like this with him.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I don't need to say more. That's absolutely true. I agree. Yeah. On the vocal side, just a few quick things so we can move on. Vocal, your tone of voice, right? If you're trying to communicate an emotion, the tone of voice that you use is really, really important. Again, people are using 93% of what you're not saying, how you're saying it, and the visual communication to understand what you mean. So if you say, yeah, this really hurts me, this really makes me feel sad. You know, if you don't communicate that with your tone of voice, whatever that means for you, I don't want to tell you how to communicate sadness, but don't fake anything, don't exaggerate it, but allow yourself to emote, allow yourself to display feelings, allow yourself to be vulnerable in that conversation. Another great way to build rapport with somebody is to show them your vulnerability first, and it shows them it's okay to be vulnerable in that conversation. Just by a show of hands, has anyone here ever cried with someone at a Cube of Truth? So I would challenge those of you who haven't, I don't want to say you have to cry, but to allow yourself, if you see someone having that emotional reaction, is to put yourself in their world, really think about how they're feeling, and just allow yourself to feel that. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean you'll cry if you're not a crier like I am. Obviously, you guys saw that. But don't be afraid to emote, to share emotion, to express your. Again, it's super vulnerable, right? But that's okay. Let's go. So, I mentioned this a few times. Coaching, not teaching. What is the difference between coaching and teaching?
Teaching, you're just lecturing them and they don't get any, you're not including them in the process.
Yes. I would say you're definitely not including them enough. I mean, you're going to have to, I agree with you. Coaching is really more focused on that other person, right? So in this example, if somebody approaches me and says, hey, can you help me with my golf swing? What's the first thing I'm going to ask them to do?
Golf swing.
Yeah, swing a golf club.
Yes.
If I can't see how they swing a golf club, I can't help them. I don't know what to tell them, right?
Of course.
So we're trying to genuinely coach people. We can't do that if we just start telling them about veganism, right? We need to find out about them. So this is a really interesting quote. People are usually more convinced by reasons they discover themselves than by those found out by others. And the way I remember this, a really simple, short form, is people believe what they say, not what they hear. I'm going to repeat that. People believe what they say, not what they hear. If you remember that from this whole workshop, I think it'll lead to much more productive conversations. When you can get people to say the things that you actually want to tell them, so much more powerful. They'll remember the things that they say. They'll actually be motivated by the things they say. If we just tell them what they should do and what's right and all that stuff, maybe they agree with you, maybe they don't, but when they walk away a week later, that conversation will fade in their world, right? So how do we do that? How do we help people come up with their own conclusions that veganism is the right thing to do?
Just ask open questions. Don't tell them, just ask them. They will explain, or maybe they will notice that they don't know. And then you ask and they will come by their own.
Thank you. Perfect segue. So we want to start investigating. Now, this doesn't mean that at some point in this conversation, we're not going to have to teach them a few things. Because obviously we do have more knowledge. But the method, the format in which we teach it is so much more important than the actual message. So it's all about process, right? The way we do it. I agree with you 100%. Let's start by asking them questions. So you said open-ended questions. These are different types of questions that you can use. Tell me about, what's an open-ended question?
It's not, if they cannot answer yes or no, because then it's quick. If you ask, yeah, do you eat meat? Yes, no, then it's done. But if you ask instead of, why do you eat meat? Or, open question.
Yeah. So Closed-ended questions, you mentioned?
Do you think it's
Yes or no
necessary
answer?
to eat meat or something like this? Like,
Any
like
question,
that, like-
yeah, any question that gives you a yes or no answer is a closed-ended question. Do you? Would you? Have you? Will you? Could you? I think pretty much, I'm trying to think of any question that has like the word you right at the beginning. Open-ended questions. Now, that's not to say that you should never use closed-ended questions. There's definitely appropriate times to use them, and there will be times in a conversation where a closed-ended question might come out to bring up a topic, but I immediately try and go into an open-ended question because I'm trying to get their perception of things. The time where you have to use a closed-ended question, I would say, is at the end of the conversation when you're trying to get them to commit to do something. To gain agreement or to gain commitment, you can only do that with a closed-ended question. So an example would be, hey, if I gave you a card right now with a bunch of resources, would you go home and check some of them out? Yes, no. Would you go vegan tomorrow? Yes, no. Right? It's forced them to make a choice, and we want to do that. We shouldn't be afraid to ask those closing questions in sales. And when we do this process really well, at the end, that question is so much more, it's such a comfortable question to ask because it's almost like a logical progression through this conversation. I think it's like, wow, geez, you've already figured out all these things for yourself. You've said this, you've said that. Would you go vegan tomorrow? Okay, so closed-ended questions. Open-ended questions. What words begin open-ended questions? How?
Why?
Why?
When?
Why's over here. So why not why? Before we keep going, since somebody brought up the why is the exact idea, the exact concept that we're trying to figure out. We do want to figure out why people think the way they do, and more importantly than us understanding that, think about their world, think about coaching. We want them to actually understand why they think what they do. Right? When they say, I need meat, or when they say whatever it is that they say, we want them to explore what led them to that conclusion, that position they have, right? Most people don't do that. Most people just say it. But what is it about this question, about asking someone a why question, that could potentially hurt the rapport that you're trying to build with them through this conversation?
It's in a defense position.
A why question could come across as a little judgmental. They feel that they have to explain themselves to you, right? Why did you wear that shirt today? Right? It's like, versus, hey, I'm curious, how do you normally decide what you wear in the mornings? I'm going to get the same understanding of how she chose to dress, but I'm not using the word why. That's the trick, is asking a why question without saying the word why. Especially when you're talking about someone's personal choice or decision or whatever it is. If you say something like, why do you think all of us humans eat meat? Not so threatening, right? Because it's a general question. But even still, I would change that question. What is it that makes it so normal for humans to eat meat? Something like that, right? You can always change it up. So that takes a little bit of practice. But whenever I think about a why question, my mind usually goes into the what or how. Another strong example that I want to use with open-ended questions, and a concept called double-clicking or triple-clicking, or however many times you need to click, is this. So here's an example, a quick role play by myself at a Cube of Truth. So you go up to someone, right? Hey, how you doing? Good. Have you seen? I won't tell you what I say, but just this topic. So sorry. Have you seen this footage before? Close-ended question, which is fine, right? Yeah or no. Say yeah. Oh, I would ask them right away. Open-ended. Oh, where have you seen this stuff before? Oh, online. Oh yeah. A lot of people have told me it's kind of floating around social media. I'm curious. How does it make you feel when you see this footage? First of all, did you guys notice just the tone of my voice, everything? Like my whole demeanor changes when I'm approaching someone who's watching this rough footage, right? So I'll say, how does it make you feel? And the most common answer I get is bad, sad, not so many mads, but bad or sad are usually, or it's horrible or something. That's great. It's great that they feel that, but I already know that 98% of people are going to answer with one of those questions, one of those types of emotional answers, sad or bad, right? I don't want to stop at that point, even though that's what I want. I want them to explore why they feel sad about that, without asking them why. So my next question is always, you know, that's totally understandable. I'm curious, what is it about this footage that makes you feel sad? An answer I've gotten before is, oh, well, it's, you know, it's just horrible to see animals suffering. Okay, so that was my double click. I asked the same kind of question twice. I'm not done. I want them to go deeper and explore more about their values, about why this bothers them, right? So my next question to something like that would be, interesting, so what is it specifically about animal suffering that bothers you? Right? Because now we're talking about animals. It's not just suffering in general. What is it specifically about animal suffering that bothers you? Oh, I don't know. Well, I think one answer I got once was, oh, I have a dog. You know, if my dog were suffering, it would really hurt me. Or they might say something like, I don't know, like animals are just innocent or something like that. You know. And so they're the ones that are saying these things, and I'm not leading them with my opinions. It's their genuine opinion, right? I'm just helping them explore that. Now, I'm also remembering these things when they say these things. So I'm filing them in my head because I'm going to use this later. Because later on, when I start presenting things and we start getting maybe into a little bit of like disagreement on some things, I need to make sure to remind them of what they said before. Like, hey, I remember at the beginning you mentioned that, you know, this really bothered you because you know, you saw animals are suffering, and you also told me that you have a dog, and you don't really see like a difference between a dog suffering and a pig suffering. Am I understanding that correctly? I might remind them of that. I might also double check, make sure I'm understanding correctly. But I'm reminding them, and they're going to say, yeah, exactly. Now, that's going to really help me later on, and we'll talk about the presentation phase. But in this phase here, I'm trying to uncover as many values as I can. I'm trying to help them explore their own values. Because most people don't take time to think about them. When people fight us on these, like, you know, whatever objections, the protein thing, or, you know, I don't know if we're healthier or not, whatever. When people start objecting to this stuff, it's because they've forgotten. They're not focusing on their underlying values, right? Because at the very least, when you remember, when you acknowledge that this is so wrong, what's happening, hopefully they're a little bit more open-minded to exploring the other information we're going to give them. So, the last thing, investigative questions. This is usually a new concept. Investigative questions are not actually questions in that they don't end with a question mark. They are statements that give you more information. Or if you think of it this way, an open-ended question is kind of like you opening the door and allowing them to like walk through and answer something. An investigative question like opens that door even more. So something like, I think I asked you, I said an investigative question when I said, tell me more about that, right? Tell me more is one of the best investigative questions. It's almost the only one I ever use in those scenarios. So someone might be telling me something, and I don't quite have enough information. Like, they're telling me something, but I don't really understand what it is. And I might just say, like, interesting, that's really interesting, tell me more about that. And I'll just give them that, like, this is my pose, my thinking pose, but like, interesting, tell me more about that. Wait, another visual thing, when I'm interested, like dogs do it, right? Dogs like give you a little head tilt. The head tilt is like, I'm interested in what you're saying, and every time, and I genuinely am, like when someone's, I want to know, I'm like, interested, tell me more about that. And I'll give them the like, I'm focused on you, I'm ready to listen, right? Like give them that, I'm ready to listen to you, like, yeah, tell me more about that. And I'm not going to move. I'm going to like focus and listen on what they're saying and what they're telling me. So that's an investigative question. There's other ones which, I don't know. Oh, help me understand is another one that I use in outreach conversations. Interesting. Can you help me understand that a little better? Help me understand. Like you're helping me understand. It's just a beautiful way to ask them to explain something better to you. Again, if it resonates, if you think it's good, use it. If you don't, it doesn't feel comfortable, don't use it. Sometimes it's just the right scenario. Like I don't use it every time, but if there's an opportunity where I really don't understand, help me understand that. It's interesting. So, we've kind of talked about some of the best questions to ask, right? Before I go on to the next topic, we're going to do something that everybody loves. We're going to have a quick test. I'm going to ask you guys to just promise me one thing in this test. It's not a difficult test. I want you to promise me that you'll be honest when you answer the question I'm going to ask you. Can everyone please promise me right now that you will be honest? Just say yes. Okay, cool. And the reason I say that is I don't want you to tell me what you think I want to hear. Just be brutally honest with your answer, okay? And I'm going to test your observation skills. So, most people think that these two circles are the same size. But one of them is actually bigger than the other one. So I just want you guys to take a quick show of hands. Who believes that the blue circle is bigger than the red circle? Just put your hands up in the air. Okay, one. One on the blue, two on the blue. Red circle, how many people believe the red circle is the bigger one? Okay, so more votes for the red. If you didn't vote for one of the two circles, I would like you to stand up right now. Interesting. So, I mean, I asked you guys to be honest. I'm glad you were. But obviously I was being honest. And yeah, the red circle, good job for the people that guessed the red circle. The red circle is definitely bigger than the blue circle. And stay standing, or you guys aren't done. You're far from done. Who's brave enough right now to tell me why you didn't choose one of these two circles?
I thought you were lying.
You thought I was lying? What made you, watch this, not why did you think of that? What made you think that I was lying?
Because the way you focus on I want you to be honest, and then you went, and then I'm going to test your observational skills. I thought you were going to try to trick us.
Okay, interesting.
Because I've seen this before.
So, as an animal rights activist, and someone that's done this presentation now a dozen times, do you think that I don't know that most of you have seen 101 Reasons to Go Vegan? Come on. So, you thought you'd seen this before, right?
Yeah.
How many people have seen 101 Reasons to Go Vegan? So if you haven't seen it and you didn't vote, you guys can actually sit down because you didn't fail for that reason. But the reason why you guys failed was because you thought that you had already seen this, right? I'm just going to show you guys what happened. So there's something called poor listening habits. We all engage in them all the time. I do as well. And what you guys engaged in right now was something called prejudging. You saw blue and red circle, and right away, you guys were like, seen this before. You know, what a loser, he's copying another speech, right?
So true.
Okay, you guys, that's so true. So, this just goes to show that even though we've heard the same things, the same objections to veganism 100 times, it might not always be the same. And we have to genuinely stop ourselves from being like, someone starts talking about plants and they have feelings, and us being like, oh shit, here we go again. You know? It's funny, like every time I've heard this brought up, like in different talks and seminars or workshops, somebody brings this up and everyone in the room goes, oh God! You know? I don't do that because, one, I think that argument helps us. We don't have to talk about the specifics of that. But, two, what if the person bringing that up, and it's happened to me, genuinely cares about like all life? It's beautiful. It's a freaking awesome thing, you caring about plants. I know some people bring it up just as, you know, a silly argument, but some people genuinely care about all life. So I don't want to assume that because someone's bringing up plants and feelings, oh, here's an idiot, you know? So we have to get away from that prejudging if we want to truly help and coach them. Private planning, one of the things that sometimes we do when someone's talking to us is we start thinking about the next thing we want to say or the next topic we want to bring up. Especially if you're just learning this new framework and let's say you go to a Cube of Truth, you're like, oh shit, what's the next step? Investigate or whatever, and then you're thinking about that and you're not listening to the other person. So don't do that, you know? This is super new, and if you choose to use this is going to happen like slowly over time. Choose one thing to do well. If you like what you hear, or one thing. Let's say I want to ask more open-ended questions in this cube, and then just focus on doing that, and slowly start building this this framework if you like it. Premature dismissing. So this is something where like you hear half of what somebody has said, and then you dismiss what they're saying without listening to the last half. The danger with that is that when you're in that conversation at a cube or any outreach, people are sometimes thinking out loud. So sometimes they're trying to figure out whatever it is that they're saying by talking about it, And if you hear half of what they say, and you already dismiss what they say, then you don't know if like, you kind of miss, sometimes it takes a little bit of a turn at the end, and it just changes what they meant by what they said. So just wait till someone finishes saying what they're saying before forming an opinion and before responding. And always ask yourself, do I have enough information to even respond to this properly? Right? Or do I need to ask another question to understand it better? We're so quick at responding with, hey, plants of feelings. You know, I'll bet you 98% of us, if somebody said plants of feelings, you already have an answer to that you would give them. Right? Plants of feelings. Oh yeah, well they're not sentient, they don't have a central nervous system. You know, I love the example like, oh, like a cell phone, it reacts to stimuli, but it doesn't have a brain. You know, or we have some sort of answer to it. Right? Let's get away from that. Right? Let's get into like understanding more about this topic that we're talking about before dismissing it. Selective listening. So we only hear what we want to hear, maybe because we're comfortable with the topic, or they brought up something that we're like comfortable dealing with, or that we agree with, and they brought up something else that we don't quite agree with, so we just like, let's just brush that under the carpet and we'll just talk about this topic. Don't ignore stuff just because it's difficult or challenging, like listen to all of it and respond to all of it. And private rehearsing is similar to private planning, just that with rehearsing, sometimes you're actually like rehearsing the words that you're about to say next, because it happens when we're nervous, especially salespeople. If it's your first phone call, you're like sweating, your heart's beating really fast. Has anyone felt nervous at a Cube of Truth doing outreach, or if it was your first time?
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So when you're nervous, sometimes you do these things. You start trying to think ahead. Calm, chill, like you don't need to have a response right away when someone's finished talking. When you create space for people to talk, it gives you time to think as well, right? So just take your time. If someone finishes talking and you don't have an answer right away, that's okay. Silence is cool sometimes. Silence for the other person means that it gives them time to process, to think a little bit. So don't feel like you have to rush through a conversation. Now, when we're done investigating, we've pulled out some really good, juicy information, we have some values we understand. Now is the point where we can go and start presenting, like, veganism, animal rights. We can start helping them make that connection. And the way that I like to do that is to think about these two concepts of values and attributes. Why do you guys think that the values side is bigger than the attributes are? Or can anyone help define what, let's say, a vegan value is and what a vegan attribute is? And one last thing, if you've already answered a lot of questions, maybe give somebody else a chance to answer, because everybody in this room has a lot of wisdom that you can share with us, and it's always nice to hear from different people. So if you haven't spoken, feel free. You don't have to, but just can you think about what would make this concept of values idea, no, sorry, let's define it. What is a vegan value versus a vegan attribute?
Value is we don't want to harm animals.
So yes, a value that we would hold is we don't want to harm animals. That's a value for sure.
The values are natural, the attributes are from the outside.
Interesting. Yeah, like values are definitely like a core part of us, I think. They can change over time and maybe develop, but they're pretty like inside of us. So maybe let's just use examples. It's easier. What would you mentioned one? What would another vegan value be?
Compassion.
Compassion. Yeah. What else? Empathy. Sure.
Non-violence.
Non-violence. Absolutely.
Justice.
Justice. Big one. Kindness. Yeah. So those are examples of values, and these are things that we're trying to figure out about this person. We're trying to help them realize that they already have those values, that they believe in kindness, they believe in justice, right? What's a vegan attribute? What's just an attribute about veganism?
We don't eat animals.
Yes, that is an attribute. So we don't eat animals or animal products. There's lots. Come on, guys. You guys are the experts. Just tell me stuff about veganism.
Healthy.
Yeah, it's healthier. We think so. What else? What's that?
Aggressive.
Other people might perceive,
Extreme.
yeah, other people might perceive it, may perceive it that way, yeah. From our point of view though, like what are like good attributes of veganism?
Climate protection.
What's that?
Climate protection.
Yeah, for sure, definitely, we contribute to less harm for the environment. And that's tied to value as well, right? Environmentalism, people that care about the environment, that would be a value, but the fact is that vegans contribute less CO2 and less greenhouse gases. What else? Water consumption, we consume less water. What's that?
Animal lovers.
Yeah, sure, yeah, we love animals.
We fight against hunger in
Yeah, yeah, for sure, that's one of those kind of like ones that are not well known in the public, but definitely, yeah, it's a way of addressing the imbalance and inequality in the food system. Anyway, I'll bet you guys you can think of a lot, right? So here's an example. When we talk about veganism to people, what we normally do, instinctively, this is just the way that humans communicate, is we normally talk about the attributes of veganism, because we think they're awesome. What if, instead of leading with the attributes, we could lead with the values that the other person communicated to us, that we uncovered at the first part of that conversation, right? So you might say something like, hey, you know, it was really clear to me when you were talking earlier, and I could see by your emotion, that you're not okay with this, that you're against animal abuse, right? Yeah. Oh yeah, you also mentioned your dog, like you would hate it if somebody were doing this to your dog, right? Yeah. Now's the time to teach. Now's the time to talk about the vegan attribute that's linked to the value that they brought up, right? So, somebody help me complete this sentence, okay? So you mentioned this, you're against animal cruelty? Yeah, of course. Did you know that...
Cows are forcibly impregnated.
Yeah, cows are forcibly impregnated, sure. That's definitely an attribute about the animal agriculture industry. Babies are taken away. What else?
Pigs are slaughtered in 6 months.
Yeah, pigs are slaughtered at 6 months. Sure, you can talk about the details. Go macro, go high level. What's a high level thing about veganism that completely aligns with this person's values of being against animal suffering and animal abuse?
Vegans don't contribute.
Yeah. Vegans don't contribute to the stuff that you're seeing on the screen. So something like I would say in that scenario is like, hey, you mentioned all this stuff. Did you know that by making a really simple choice of what milk you buy, for example, you can completely eliminate and stop your participation in that industry, in what you're seeing on that screen? Did you know that? Would it surprise you to learn that? So even when I'm teaching, even when I'm presenting them with that vegan attribute, I'm asking it a question like, hey, I'm not superior to you, like, I'm curious, did you know that? I mean, it's a fact, right? I'm not saying it's debatable, but I'm saying, did you know that this fact, did you know that you could stop participating just by making a different choice? Oh, how are they going to answer to that? You've aligned they brought up the value, say, oh shit, here's the information that you need, right? Because of that value. Can someone help me with that? Let's say an environmentalist. Let's say someone talks about how they used to work for Greenpeace for 20 years, and that's why they went vegetarian, right? So let's talk about from an environmental standpoint. You've already had a good discussion with them. They really care about the environment. They've talked about other environmental issues. Somebody help me out. How would you start this and then this?
Alice, quick question. How long do you think it's gonna continue for? Just because of the reservation for lunch?
What, I'd say by 3 o'clock we'll be done. It's 2:20 now.
So we'll be there at 3, okay?
Okay, well, I don't know how far the restaurant is. Yeah, okay. So environmentalism. Someone help me out. Hey, so you mentioned earlier, okay, I'll give you the first part. Hey, you mentioned earlier that, the environment is super important. You're obviously probably more aware of some of the impacts of like greenhouse gases and our energy consumption and all that stuff. It's so amazing that you're like so focused on this. Yeah? Say it nice and loud. Yeah. Did you know, or would you be surprised to know that?
Livestock causes pollution or gas, I don't know the English one.
Yeah, but no, what you're saying is right. Like, would you be surprised to know that livestock production is one of the top contributors to climate change, to global warming, to greenhouse gases? Would you be surprised to know that as an environmentalist, right? You're presenting that attribute, which is good. We have to share those facts. And again, you're doing it because they brought up, because you uncovered that value that they care about. If I start bringing stuff up like this, and they don't really care about the environment that much, what happens to our rapport, right? They don't care. And then you're not coaching anymore. Now you're going back to just teaching and being a preachy vegan, right? That's when we get accused of being preachy, is when we start teaching when people don't recognize that it's aligned to their values. It is aligned to their values. But that's why the process is so important, that they understand that we're giving this information to them because they've expressed that that's a value, because they've in that conversation they've understood that's a value to them. Does that make sense to everyone? Like, yeah, does it make sense? Can you see like people being more receptive to our vegan message and us coming across as less preachy if we can do this well? Yeah. And I'm really open to feedback. Does this feel manipulative, or does it feel like we're tricking people into veganism? No. And that's the really important thing. And this is sales, by the way. When you come across a good salesperson that can do this, they're not tricking you. They're actually helping you. They're trying to help you uncover what it is you actually need from a product or service. Service? That word sounds so weird. Service. And then they're going to tell you about the features of their product or service that align with what you care about. That's what a good salesperson should do. If they're not doing that, if you find salespeople doing a lot of this, just talking about their product, they're not going to be able to help you that well. So you might want to try and find another salesperson to help you. When people ask me, like, what if somebody, as a sales guy, what if somebody does this to you? They're like, would you feel weird if someone did this to you? I'm like, no. If someone did this to me when I was going to go buy a car, I would love them, because they can actually help me. Because they're going to take the time to understand what's important to me when I buy a car, and they're only going to show me the stuff that I care about. Because otherwise it's that salesperson is like, oh, this car does this, and it has that, and it has this, and that. Like, I don't care about that. Take the time to understand what I care about first, and then show me the info, right? So, we've done all that really well, okay? We've presented, we've done that example of you mentioned the dog suffering, you're against that. Did you know this? They're like, no, I didn't know that. What do you think? Man, that's amazing. I guess I should really think about this, Now you get to the point where you can confirm. You can ask them, hey, would you go vegan tomorrow? I would. If the conversation went that well up until now, I say, hey, it sounds like this really makes a lot of sense. Would you consider going vegan? What's the worst that can happen? They say no. This is what all salespeople are afraid of. This is why a lot of salespeople don't actually ask for the sale. They don't ask the close-ended question at the end. Hey, so this sounds like it works. It really aligns. Do you want to buy this? Here, would you go vegan, or would you try Vegan 22 Challenge, or would you watch a documentary? Ask the yes or no question. They say no, and then what usually follows that? They don't usually just say no and then walk away, right? They might give you that, and then what do they say? Yeah, it's hard, or?
Because.
Yeah, or because. Cheese. They do this. They give you an objection, right? So, what is an objection? What do you guys think an objection is? When someone says this, it's hard, but cheese, meat tastes good. What did you say?
Because this and that.
Yeah, because anything. What is an objection?
A fear.
A fear? It could be a fear.
Justification.
A justification for what?
For not changing anything.
Yeah.
Or not like it.
Yeah. Excuse. I hear that a lot. It's an excuse.
But it can be also selfish. So
Could be selfish. Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah. So we are a selfish species. So being selfish is something. The way I perceive an objection, it's like an obstacle, holding them back from actually aligning their actions with their values. It's something that's normal. People will not just go, oh yeah, I should go vegan. Everyone's not going vegan and keeps the truth. Because there are things that we've been conditioned our whole lives. We've grown up loving the taste of animal products. So for them to think of giving this up, they're going to be resistant. That's totally normal. When people object, it's a good thing. It means that they're still engaged in this conversation and they're still thinking about it. When somebody stops objecting, it means they don't care usually. So if you're in a conversation and you get no objections to veganism, that person probably doesn't give a shit. Really, they're just not thinking about it. Because when you think about it, you're going to come up with reasons why this doesn't make sense or this or that. So objections are good. If we think about them like obstacles that we need to help them overcome, and not points of debate where we need to tell them why they're wrong, we can use this. So this is, I know it seems like a lot, but it's actually not that difficult, and I'll go through an example. So these are the 7 steps to objection handling. I don't always do all 7 steps, I don't always do this perfectly, but let me run this through you and see, or by you, so let me run this by you and see what you think about this. So, first of all, you ask them, hey, would you go vegan, right? And they give us an objection. I'm gonna throw it out there. Give me a common objection, but not one of the most difficult, like, oh no, give me whatever you want. Somebody, first person yell it out, that's what I'll use.
I love cheese.
I love cheese. Beautiful. Okay, so I love cheese. So, sometimes an objection is really short. Sometimes it's, you know, people will talk a little bit. So listen, just don't interrupt their objection. When you ask that question, would you go vegan? And they start telling you about cheese, if they want to talk about cheese for 60 seconds, talk about cheese for 60 seconds. I don't want to interrupt you. I want to hear everything and really listen for clues and cues of what they're saying. Really listen intently, because it's your job as a coach, going back to the golf swing, right? If you're kind of like, if Tiger Woods is over here swinging, you're trying to coach him, and you're over here kind of like looking at your phone, like, oh yeah, okay. You're not going to be a good coach. Listen intently to what they're saying, and try to see things where maybe you can help with. So if the objection is that simple, no, give me a little bit more. Talk like a non-vegan. Tell me more. Just give me that objection about cheese, if you can. So, hey, would you go vegan tomorrow?
I'm not sure. How can I give up my camembert and, and my parmesan? It's difficult. So I really love
Watch me,
pizza without cheese, you know. So.
Yeah. I hear you. Yeah. But this is exactly what I would be doing in the Cupid Truth. I'd be smiling and nodding. I understand. I know that I've heard these objections before. I know where it's coming from. I was never necessarily in a place where I was so addicted to cheese, but I used to eat pizza, I used to eat cheese all the time, right? So I listened. Now I'm going to acknowledge and I'm going to empathize. So my acknowledgement is first this. We've already, remember, through this conversation, we've already established all the things we've talked about, that she's against animal cruelty, the dog thing, whatever it is. So I'm going to acknowledge. So if I understand you correctly, you would consider eliminating animal products from your diet, except for the fact that you just really enjoy the taste of cheese, right? Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah, I get it.
I do.
I get it. I totally understand and acknowledge it. I'm sorry, I'm going to empathize right now. Empathy, you can do it 2 ways. You can do it from your own personal experience, which is the strongest one. So if I was addicted to cheese before, I would definitely use that. But authenticity is key, so never make up an empathetic statement. So if I never actually had that addiction to cheese, I will use other people's scenarios to empathize with the person I'm speaking with. So in this case, I would say something like, you know what, I hear you, I used to eat cheese all the time, so I'm going to empathize with that part of it. We eat a lot of cheese. You know, I used to eat pizzas. I used to buy blocks of cheese and just eat them. Literally, I did. I just eat them like that, you know. And I also talk to a lot of people who they want to stop, you know, participating in this industry, but because of like the flavors and the taste that they've become accustomed to, they find it really difficult. You know, I'm empathizing, I'm understanding, you know, why that objection exists. Now I'm going to ask questions. So the question I'm going to ask you is, you know, I'm trying to remind you of the values you had in this acknowledgement, in this part here, and I'm going to ask you a question. So I'm curious, you know, if you really wanted to stop, you know, this, where you're seeing all this harm to the cows and the baby cows, what would be the most challenging thing for you, do you think, to stop eating cheese?
The most challenging, what do you mean with that?
Yeah, let's say tomorrow you said, you know what, I don't want to pay for baby cows to be killed, and the things that we talked about in the conversation, for example, let's say, I don't want to fund this anymore, but yet you have this really strong like for the taste of cheese, right? What would you find the hardest about saying, okay, I'm going to stop eating cheese if you did that tomorrow?
I tried the vegan cheese and I really didn't like it.
Okay, interesting. So what you're telling me now is you're actually kind of giving me another objection within an objection, which happens as well. So this is where it gets a little complex. I want to talk about this objection. So right now, watch this. I'm going to go back. This is where sometimes, oh no, I'm not going to go back. I can actually reiterate here. So if I'm understanding correctly, this is a really powerful statement. If I'm understanding correctly, if you mentioned vegan cheese, you tried vegan cheese, but you didn't like it. If you could find cheese that you enjoyed eating just as much as the cheese you're used to, is that what you would need, or would you find that helpful in stopping, you know, your participation in that industry, or you know, whatever, however you want to say it?
Yeah, I think it would be okay, but for the moment I didn't find any cheese that tastes like this, so it's too hard for me, you know?
Yeah. You know, I know where you're coming from, because I struggle to find, actually I don't even buy a lot of cheese because it's a little harder to find and that sort of thing. But would you be surprised to know that I eat pizza with cheese that I absolutely love, and where are we? We're in Freiburg. If I knew the city and I could recommend something, would you be open to going to this vegan pizza place down the street and trying one of their pizzas and see what you think?
I've been there.
Oh, you've already been there. Okay, so watch this. So, I've been there. Oh, interesting. So, and did you try all the different cheeses that they offered? Yes. Say yes.
Yes.
Yeah, you did. Yeah. You know what? It's funny, but I don't blame you, because obviously all of our tastes are individual, right? The same way that I don't, you know, when I used to eat meat, obviously I liked certain places for my hamburgers, and other people liked other places, and I didn't like those, right? So, would you be open to at least trying different types of cheeses to see if you found some that you liked?
Yes, why not?
Okay, all I want to do is just kind of explore the idea of like of exploring cheeses, but I also don't want to let the fact go that even if she didn't find a cheese, that she still should keep eating cheese. So then I would say, I would actually bring this up. I'm going to bring up this like objection almost against myself here. I say, listen, but let's suppose that you couldn't find any cheese that you absolutely loved, right? I'm curious, for you personally, what do you say is more important to you? Your pleasure of eating cheese, or the life of that cow that we were watching in the video?
I am a carnist, huh? I play carnist.
Yeah.
Sorry. I don't know that cow, you know. So I've rarely had somebody say that to me. I've asked that question. I just kind of started using that question a little bit more, and every time, people are like, "Yeah, the life is more important than the sensory pleasure, right?" It's been really. I still today have not had somebody say my taste is more important. That's a tricky one, because that's a really selfish position to take, and most people don't even feel comfortable expressing that, even though that's what they're doing now. But they're recognizing that, like, maybe that's not right. Like, even that, like, most people will say life. But I would then, if they said, well, I don't know that cow, I mean, okay, I don't want to get too in-depth into this, because this is kind of going down like an Earth and Ed style Socratic questioning thing, right? Which we can do, but most people, most of them, don't go so hard on you on these objections. Most people aren't like the really, right? Like, would you guys agree that in most conversations at Cubes of Truth, people are generally like not giving you the hardest time? You'll find people that do maybe 10% or something like that, but most of them are like, they'll give you their objection, the cheese thing, but if you ask them, like, well, to you though, what's more important? Like, the life of an animal, and like obviously the suffering that goes with that, or the pleasure you get from eating cheese? I'm sorry, I'm thinking about my family, you know. So they really don't matter about life, of course, that's a problem. I have this problem.
Yeah. So that goes back to, if someone doesn't care about the life of a cow, that goes back to the investigation stage where you have to find other values. Then you're on the wrong value. Or you haven't helped them uncover that value. Because they might be saying that, they probably don't mean it, because they probably couldn't be the ones to stick the knife into the cow's throat, right? And so if you ask somebody, hey, you know, I'm curious, so if you love cheese so much, would you be able to take a knife and stab a baby cow in the throat to take his mother's milk? Well, no. You know, I've asked a similar question, but I can never kill an animal. I've never killed an animal, I can never kill an animal. I couldn't do it, right? That's their true heart. That's them saying they can't do it. So you gotta help them connect that, you know? Then how do you justify, not to me, but to yourself, right? How do you justify to yourself if you're not able to take the life of an animal, paying somebody to take the life of the animal, right? And sometimes people like just need to think about it, like, shit, I am taking the life of that animal just by paying somebody.
Let them ask them those questions, and just shut up and just let them think about it. Yeah.
But even here you have some people, then you ask them and they would say, yeah, I stabbed the cow, doesn't matter. So in my experience it's the best, and they are selfish, so they don't care at all. It's just good to change the topic to like a selfish topic. Maybe to go to health and ask, what's about your own health, and I mean cheese is bad for you, and like go different direction.
Yeah.
I mean, if they like selfish, you can talk for hours about it. And it's always in a circle.
Yeah, I agree with you. Again, it's a rare case from
But yeah,
many
it's a rare
cubes.
case,
It's rare,
of
but
course.
if it does happen, again, I don't want to spend too much time exploring the 10% of cases,
Yeah.
because let's focus on the 90% and do that well. So in 90% of the cases, if you do this well, you'll usually get some form of agreement, right? You'll usually get to the point where they might say, okay, well, yeah, it's not really, my pleasure of eating cheese is not worth what I'm watching on this video. Keep in mind, I have this horrible video in front of them about the dairy industry, right? Most people will say it's not. So then present a solution to them, you know? You can do it in different ways. What I might say is, you know what I've found is that over time, because I was like you, so opposed to this cruelty and the suffering and the death, just the death of animals for my pleasure, that I actually consume way less cheese now. And because of that, I feel way healthier, I lost weight, and I've found other foods now that I enjoy just as much that don't rely on the suffering of others. What do you think about that? That's such a weak close, but that's all I can think about right now. What do you think about that? You know, I'm trying to seek some agreement here, right? And see what they feel about that. Would you be open to exploring foods that maybe you haven't tried before and see if you can enjoy them so that you can avoid this? You know? And most people will they'll go with you a little bit, you know? And at the very least, I just want them to see a possibility of leaving cheese. And depending on how, if you were being this difficult with me, I'll take anything you give me. If you start saying, well, yeah, I mean, I guess I could try it. As soon as you said something like that, I say, you know what, that's really amazing that you would make that effort, because I can tell it really hurts you, right, that these animals are suffering. If I gave you a card right now with information on it that would give you more information maybe about not just the dairy industry, but maybe other things that you could use, other foods that you could enjoy, would you look at it? Would you go home and research it yourself? I'm going to take that opportunity where that little, if it's a really challenging conversation, I'm not going to ask her to go vegan tomorrow. Obviously she's struggling with that, but take those opportunities when you get them, if you get that little bit of open-mindedness, and then hit them with that card, you know? Guys, thank you for challenging me on that one. That was a more difficult one than I usually get, but yeah, that is all I have to say about that. So thank you guys for listening. I hope that it was useful. I hope that you have some things to think about for this cube and for other cubes. And if you have any questions, now's a good time.
Why are you so good at this?
19 years, man, really. So part of the reason why I'm doing this is I was trying to, what's that?
It was rhetorical.
Yeah, no, but Lena brought it up in the SAVE presentation, right? That moral obligation that we have to help solve an issue. And it actually took me a while to connect the fact that I've done this my whole life. I've trained people how to sell and make lots of money. Well, why can't I help the vegan activist community veganize people better, right? At least from my perspective. So that's why I left my career. That's why I'm doing this right now. I'll be touring, just doing these workshops, and I hope that it helps. But I have a lot of experience, and don't feel discouraged if you start doing this and it's overwhelming. It's too much. Make a ton of mistakes. Do a lot of outreach. That's the key. Is practice, practice, practice. Use this framework. I'll put these slides up, or the most important slides. I'll put them up so that you guys can. You know what? I'm just going to do something. I'm going to put it up on the AVO Facebook page because I keep forgetting to put it onto the individual cities' pages and stuff. So I'll just put it up here and save a PDF file, for example, into your phone. And then, if you're at a Cube of Truth right before, you can kind of review it. You can review your objection handling steps and practice them. And don't worry if you make mistakes in the conversation. The rapport building stuff and the way that you do things is almost always more important than the actual little words that you say. So if you miss a step here and there, people will forgive that if you're genuinely like coming across positive, nice, non-judgmental. So, yeah. Any questions, comments about any of this stuff? I'm super open to criticism as well. If you don't think something works well or you want to question it, I like hearing that. Like you won't hurt my feelings. I didn't develop any of that stuff. So. JB.
Sorry, no. If someone else has a question, sorry.
Okay, let's go over here.
Yeah.
Yes, I was just wondering about the question whether it is manipulative.
Which question?
Yeah, you ask if this kind of method
Mhm.
of questioning is
Mhm.
manipulative. And I thought, I for myself thought, of course it is,
Mhm.
because you have a goal. You're not just talking for fun, you have
Mhm.
a goal, you want to, you just mentioned to veganize.
Okay,
To
okay.
veganize the people, you go out on the street with a goal,
Mm-hmm.
and of course it's manipulative, but what's the problem about it?
Okay.
Because I don't care, but
I got you.
it seems to be important for you that it's not, it's authentic, it's not manipulative.
I think the word manipulative has a negative connotation
Yeah.
attached to it, and I don't see the negative of helping people align their actions with their values. I can't force somebody to have a value, so like what we just talked about, if someone genuinely does not care about animal suffering, I can't manipulate them into caring about animals anymore. I can try and help them discover that. If it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. There were times in sales where people would like tell me about their business, about what they needed, and I would literally tell them, you know what, at this point in time, I don't think that I can help you with our products or services. It's just not a fit right now. You know, what we do doesn't align with what you need. So sometimes you have to do that, and Anonymous trains that. If you come across somebody that really doesn't give a shit about animals, don't waste your time on it. You know, yeah, you can get into the health conversation a little bit, but genuinely, people make these big changes for the ethical reason. So don't stress out. Learn when to like walk away, because there's lots of other people that can benefit from your coaching, from your, from that experience of talking to you.
I have a question for that.
Of course.
So when you meet someone and you think, okay, he or she is not gonna change your perspective, do you just, or what can you say? Can you say, like, okay, I see we're not coming to an agreement, I think I'm gonna end this conversation, or what would you say?
Oh man, that's a really good question. I might just have like an idea of like, if someone's just really resistant or they just don't care, you know what? Okay, one woman in Spain, in Madrid, literally told me that she sees these videos and she feels nothing. She does not care about those animals. I'm like, and I thought she was kind of joking. Come on, really? I'm like, you really don't care? She's like, no, it doesn't bother me at all. You know? So you know what? I mean, like, we're here showing people the truth of what happens, and most people, it does affect them. But if it doesn't affect you, then I'm sorry to hear that. But I really hope that you have a good day and enjoy yourself, and just like, okay, have a great day, bye. Like, I'm not gonna waste my time. It didn't even bother me. I was just like surprised, but I'm like, you're not gonna change everyone, and you guys all know how effective. Again, sales and outreach are a percentages game, right? With the skill set that you have, you'll be able to quote unquote veganize X amount of people. The better your skills get and your practice gets, you'll get better and better and better at doing that. But no matter how good you get, no matter how good of a salesperson you are or an outreacher you are, you will never get everyone, and you probably won't get the majority. Like, you'll get certain percentages, and you're just trying to increase those percentages. Everything we just talked about is just trying to increase percentages. Because all of you, before this, even if you don't rely on any of this, you still have your percentages. You'll still be able to veganize a certain amount of people. So don't worry about the really hard ones. I gotta take my own advice in this, because sometimes I talk to people way too long and I don't want to give up. Sometimes I should give up earlier. But don't give up too early. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, I work as a therapist, and I'm constantly working with people and trying to get them to look at their values, what they want in life, and what you said about the rapport and the relationship, that really is, I believe, and I experienced that, the most important thing. Like, if you build a relationship with somebody, they trust you, you can talk about anything. But if you don't have that foundation, then they probably won't listen to you and not care about what you're saying or what you're trying to bring across.
And to top up on that, I believe that confidence, somebody mentioned it, it's important to help build that trust. Because when you show someone that you're confident in your presence, in being there, so this is my opening for whether it's right or wrong, this is what I use, I found it to be pretty good at Cubes of Truth, is I go up to people generally and I say, hey, excuse me, if I'm in Germany, at first I say, do you speak English? Annoying line I have to say. I don't even have to say that, I could just start speaking English, but I usually say, excuse me, do you speak English? Yeah. I say, do you know what this is? And I say it to first just confuse them a little bit, like, is this person like working with this, or are they just another bystander? And it first breaks down that like, oh, here comes a salesperson type of thing. And some people are like, no, I actually don't know. And again, we're kind of like aligning right away, like we're both on this side. And then I'm like, oh, like, if you like, I can explain it to you. And then I usually have my hoodie on, so I show them, oh, this is the group, you know, Anonymous for the Voiceless. And I just say, you know, it's an international organization. We do these street installations where we show people the truth of the animal agriculture industry. And I noticed you were watching it. Have you seen this before? And I go into that. But just my explanation and the way that I present that, I hope, is building a little bit of like confidence, a little bit of rapport. It's giving them something. I'm giving them some information which they didn't have, which they were there like curious, like what is this? So I hope that they feel like, oh, like, thank you for answering that. I hope that they feel that, you know. And then I'm going into the conversation. But then going back to the building rapport thing, that is, yeah, that's key. None of this really matters if you can't have that bond with that person. And I don't know how to, I mean, there's those other little things, but you really have to, it has to come from your heart. Same thing like veganism. It has to come from your heart. You have to genuinely want to help this person. And I think when you have that in your heart, they will feel it too, right? Get rid of our judgmental side. I know it's sometimes hard to do. I was not always like this. When I was earlier on in my veganism, I was much more like angry and judgmental. And when people gave me objections, I was more like, oh, what an idiot, like, or they're just being defensive, you know? I view it differently now, but it took me time, even though I knew this stuff. So try and let that go, and again, the better we can coach, the better we can actually help others. Is there another hand over here?
I mean, just that's a really good opening line. Just it's one of the biggest takeaways, I guess, for me. It's so good. Just when you just, I mean, just awesome. Yeah, if they know what this is. And just one thing I want to add, which I'm pretty sure you also agree on with, it's just like if we're on the outreach and just using the we form of all the stuff.
Yes.
Just because, I mean, if we buy meat, then just include them in the group.
I love it, yeah. Does everyone already do that? Or so the idea of what is it about, like using the we, so including yourself in this problem, because we were once part of the problem, but I always try to do that, is never say the you, because you comes across potentially as judgment, like why do you eat meat? Why do we eat meat as a society? Get the pressure off this person. You're working to solve a problem. You're not like judging them, right? And not that we are, but again, you have to be very conscious that your communication can come across that way. So yeah, the we is super powerful. What do you think it is about society that makes us eat meat? As opposed to why do you eat meat? It's the same question. You're trying to find the same thing, but the we. Thank you for bringing that up. That's really good. If there are no more questions right now, or if you think of a question, we can always talk at the cube, or I should say after the cube. I really just want to address this, not that anybody here has ever done it that I know of, but when we go to cubes, same thing that when I used to go to work, I was one of the top salespeople in every job that I had, and it's why I think I did well in sales. When I went to work, I had one thing on my mind, was making money, and I knew that if I was standing next to my buddy talking, I was missing potential customers, right? So the same thing goes for Cubes of Truth. If we're going to a Cube of Truth, like let's avoid talking to each other, even though we might have lots of interesting stuff to talk about. Let's go after and have a drink, have a meal, and talk after that or before it. But when we're at the Cube, let's really try to be focused on what we're doing, because we're investing our time, and let's try and make that as productive as possible, you know, and stay focused. I know, and if you need a break, by the way, totally acceptable. Remove yourself from the cube area and go off to, sometimes there's like a designated break area, or you can go chill out for a little bit if you need 10-15 minutes. You had a hard conversation. If you had a hard conversation and you're emotional, get out of there. Don't go to another conversation, because you'll only bring that emotion into it. Take a little break, take a 10-minute breather. If there's somebody else that's taking a break, talk to them about it. We can vent to each other right? We're like colleagues, we're co-workers, we're co-activists. Talk to each other about these things, help each other, coach each other to get over these things, and then go back. But when you're heated over something, it's a good time to take a little bit of a break. So just a couple last things. These are, and I had put up the See Behind Walls as well. Those are my social medias. Again, please feel free to connect. All of the workshops that I do, this one as well as the 2-day workshop, are all gifts from me to the community. Obviously, I've left my full-time career, so my ability to offer these workshops depends on the community. There is absolutely no obligation to support this financially, but if you feel like you would like to support this workshop and the work that I do have a Patreon account. I don't have it up here, but also by the same name. It's just patreon.com/amazingvegan-outreach. No amount is too little. Like €1 a month sounds like nothing, but like lots of little drops in the bucket really actually help a long way. So I just want to throw that out there if somebody wants to support the workshop. This tour right now is funded by the Save Movement. The future tour that I'm doing is all going to be self-funded by me, so that's where I'll really need the support from the community. And if I'm back for the 2-day workshop, it's going to be basically this framework, but way more in depth, and it's a much more coaching sort of environment, whereas here was me teaching and talking a lot. The 2-day workshop is a lot of breakout sessions, a lot of group work, a lot of us discovering more things for ourselves. And usually at the end of the 2-day workshop, people feel really confident that when they go to Cube of Truth, they can actually like do these things. So please, if I'm back, I mean, this community is really amazing. So I should be able to come back to this region and offer the 2-day workshop. It'll be announced on the Facebook page, and your local AV group will most likely also announce it. Spots are definitely limited in that 2-day workshop. So if you see it, definitely jump on it if you want to attend. And yeah, I'll just end again with just an absolute amount of gratitude. I get just as much, if not more, I think, out of these workshops and these events and meeting all of you. It just inspires me and it fuels me to keep going. So thank you guys for your dedication, and I look forward to an awesome Cube of Truth today with all of you. So thank you. I mentioned it earlier, I'll mention it again. I do have those little decals. So the decals can go on like a car, or I have them on my laptop, but they are good quality. Like they could go in a car and they'll withstand weather. If anybody wants one, I'm selling for like €5, and it like helps fund the future tour.
This is what they gave us.
The Save Movement
Don't
suit,
ask
yeah.
for more money. Thank you, everyone.
Let's be really clear though, I'm not taking any of this. This is all for Save, because the Save tour obviously has to be funded. That stuff is specifically the Diablo stuff. Yeah.
Before you go, please, one more time, thank you, Alex and Lena. It's a blessing that you came here. One thing I'd like to add, because I think it was not included in the workshop. There are 2 roles in the Cube of Truth. Either you stand in the cube or you are outreacher. But actually there's a third option, which is shadowing. This is a great opportunity to shadow someone like Alex, or shadow someone like Lena, or shadow someone like Shani, or Sophie, or Thomas, who's going to be there, who's outreach machine. So shadowing is the idea of just following an outreacher, an experienced outreacher, and just listening, just eavesdropping, and it can really help your outreach game. So this is a very good opportunity to take.
And if someone does shadow me, I would personally appreciate and benefit from feedback after the conversation. So like when you hear that conversation at the end, like talk to me and give me feedback. Like tell me what you learned, what I could have done better, especially like really like what you've noticed. That's really, and I hope you guys would be open to feedback as well. Yeah, if other people are being shadowed. Yeah.
And